Synthetic division is just another way to do long division. Most people love synthetic division because once they learn it, means they don't have to do long division anymore. Now, long division, as you know from our last video and some of the assignments you're going to be doing, it's a little tedious. You have a lot of multiplication, moving things over, checking this, checking that. Synthetic allows us to kind of organize our data and solve the problem in just a little bit more simpler of a way. So to do synthetic, you start by giving yourself a little bracket here, and your numbers that go on this top row are the coefficients of your polynomial that you're dividing into. So here we have 2x to the fourth, the coefficient is 2, so I'm going to put a 2 here. Next up, I have no x cubed term. Remember, that means you insert a 0x cubed, so our coefficient for that is going to be 0. Next, we've got negative 5x squared, coefficient of negative 5. Then we've got a 5x, that gives us a coefficient of 5. And last, we have this negative 2, and I'll finish that off with a negative 2. Now your number that goes on the outside here is always going to be the opposite of whatever your divisor is. So here we have x plus 2. Your opposite, or if we flip this sign here, is going to be negative 2. So this is going to be a negative 2 out here, the opposite of whatever you're dividing by. Then after you've got it set up, you just follow this simple pattern. You go ahead and add your numbers down. I'm going to bring this 2 down. And then you multiply to your top number here. So here we have negative 2 times 2. That gives us negative 4. Then we do 0 plus negative 4. That gives us negative 4. Negative 2 times negative 4. That gives us 8. Then we've got negative 5 plus 8 gives us 3. 3 times negative 2 gives us a negative 6. 5 minus 6 gives us a negative 1. And finally, we've got negative 2 times negative 1, which is a positive 2. And negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So to get your actual answer, what you do is you take these numbers now that you've gotten at the bottom, and you make these the coefficients of your new polynomial, which is your answer. So our first coefficient is going to be 2. And you always start 1 degree less than where you started. So here we started with x to the fourth. This first term is going to be x to the third because it's 1 degree less. Next, we've got a negative 4. So we'll go to negative 4x squared. Here we've got a 3. So we'll go to positive 3x. And here we've got a negative 1. So we finish off with a negative 1. This would be your remainder term, but since we have a 0 here, there is no remainder. And this is going to be our answer. Alright, let's take a look at one more example. Here we have 10x cubed minus 5x squared plus 5x minus 2, all divided by 2x minus 3. Now when you have a divisor with a coefficient in front of the x, notice here we have a 2x minus 3 as opposed to something like just x minus 3. When you have a coefficient out in front like this 2, we first have to rewrite the problem before we can use synthetic division. So when we have this 2x minus 3 here, I'm going to take my coefficient and I'm going to divide the top and bottom by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and divide the top and the bottom by 2. So for my bottom number, this is going to be 2x divided by 2, which is just going to be x, and a negative 3 divided by 2, which is going to be minus 3 halves. Now my top number, each of these terms is also going to be divided by 2. So 10x cubed divided by 2 is just going to be 5x cubed. Then I have minus 5x squared. That's going to be minus 5 halves x squared. Let's give myself some more room here. Next we have plus 5x. That's going to be plus 5 halves x. And lastly we've got minus 2. That minus 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. That's just going to be minus 1. Now that we have our problem rewritten without a coefficient next to this x in the bottom, we can go ahead and set up our synthetic division problem. So my coefficients are going to be 5, negative 5 halves, positive 5 halves, and negative 1. My number on the outside here is going to be the opposite of my x minus 3 halves, which is going to be positive 3 halves. Then I proceed with the same pattern. So I'm going to bring this 5 down. Here I have a 5 like this. I'm going to go ahead and do 5 times 3 halves. That's going to give me 15 halves. If I do negative 5 halves plus 15 halves here, that's going to give me a 10 halves, or 5. Then I do 5 times 3 halves again. That's going to give me 15 halves here. I'm going to do 5 halves plus 15 halves. That would give me 20 halves, or 10. Then I have this 3 halves times 10. That's going to give me 30 halves. And 30 halves is the same as 15. So I do negative 1 plus 15, which gives me a 14. All right, now that I've got my bottom row filled out, I'm just going to rewrite my answer using these as my coefficients and my remainder. That's going to be 5x squared. Now I chose x squared, remember, because it's one less degree than where we started. 5x squared plus 5x plus my next number is 10, so plus 10, plus, now this time we do have a remainder. This 14 is a remainder, so remember, you take this 14, I'm going to say plus 14, divided by what you started with, x minus 3 halves. And instead of writing x minus 3 halves, because we don't want this extra complex fraction down here, an easier way to do it is, instead of x minus 3 halves, let's move this back up here. Let's rewrite what we started with. Remember, we started with 2x minus 3 before we divided by 2. So we're going to put in our remainder down here, divided by 2x minus 3, just because it looks cleaner, it's simplified, and all of this down here is going to be our answer.